Oh, you like the PhD, Dr. Bird PhD, sir?
No, I'm saying like I don't have a PhD.
I can add it if you like.
An upgrade on the podcast.
Welcome to Cloud Realities, an original podcast from Capgemini. And this week, we are still live at Microsoft Ignite at McCormick Place in Chicago. I'm Dave Chapman.
And I'm Rob Kernan.
And we've also got with us producer extraordinaire, Marcel van der Berg.
Thank you, Dave.
How you doing?
I'm fine.
Good?
A little bit cold. It's really minus.
We are literally
minus 25.
We are sitting under like a massive bit of aircon, and outside the windy city is living up to its billing.
Yeah. And it's not the wind, that's the windy city. It's about the politics. Left and right.
He's gone. I can't believe he's gone there. What are you doing, Marcel? Stop.
It's from the 1900s.
Yeah.
Read your stuff. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's.
Well, you are
it's
most
not
of the
wind.
time, so I'm going to go with you are this time as well.
Well, excellent fact. Excellent fact. Well done. So you will have heard we also have Robert Kernahan with us. Rob, how you doing?
I'm all right, Dave, actually. I am.
Hardly seen you.
No, yeah, I've not seen you at all. And we haven't got other conferences coming either. But
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm liking Chicago.
Oh yeah, what's standing out for you at the moment?
Feel of the city. It's like you're in a film set with the L train and you walk under and the struts and them driving through. I keep thinking there's going to be a big car chase.
Yep.
It is very cinematic looking.
It is. It's ace. And the building architecture's lovely and it's just nicely laid out. It's, it works well.
So the other night we took the opportunity to go out a little bit in the town and it was very, very low hanging cloud. It couldn't have looked more Gotham. It was absolutely amazing. And we made the cardinal mistake of letting the most anxious traveller in the world direct us to the bar. Robert Kernahan, would you like to tell that story?
Well, there are lots of tall buildings in Chicago and a lot of them have a place at the top where you can get a drink.
Or at least see a view.
At least see a view.
Not all of them have got bars though, have they?
And I may have told you an address to go to and it was the only one that didn't have a bar at the top and I just got completely mixed up with the places and then we had to go somewhere else.
So we actually went to 3 buildings in 2 cab rides to get to one bar.
Okay, right. Now, there was a little bit of technology confusion with my phone about which direction I was facing. So yes, we might have gone into multiple high-rise buildings before finding the general location, even though the general location wasn't actually in a high-rise. You entered it from around the side. But let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
Because we did get there. And the irony being, it was a bar in the clouds where we had a drink. It was great.
It was literally in a cloud. It was a wall of white where we should have had
360 white.
Yeah, we should have had an amazing view, but actually it was pretty nice sitting in a cloud, to be honest.
I mean, it is highly valuable marketing that we went to a cloud bar in the clouds.
Right.
Just think of that, the perfect
synergy
partner, the synergy to the podcast.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It was synergistic.
It was. You know what that was? That was an omen for a good week of records.
Yeah, exactly.
Am I the only person who thinks if it's so cloudy that you can just stand on the clouds? If you go outside, you don't fall.
No, you can do that, Marcel.
Yeah, I can.
Next time we see you, you should give that a try.
Yeah. Dave, you can, come on, where's your responsibility here? We need to explain to Marcel that you can't actually stand on the clouds.
Yeah, so something in my body is saying you can go outside and just walk on the clouds. I don't know. Something
is that like that sort of vertigo thing where you're standing on the edge of a building and you feel like you want to jump?
Maybe.
It could be like a vertigo thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
For any listeners out there, do not attempt to stand on clouds.
Yeah, just a little disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
Anyway, look, on with the show. So joining us on day 2 of Ignite to discuss responsibility and security in AI and also building and scaling AI and developer communities, we have a huge roster of amazing guests. We have Rudra Mitra, who's the CVP of Microsoft Purview. We've got Dr. Sarah Bird, who's the Chief Product Officer of Responsible AI at Microsoft. Yina Arenas, who is the VP now of Cloud Foundry. And then finally, we've got Scott Hanselman, who's the VP at Microsoft and their developer community. So we've got 3 conversations coming up between now and the end of the show, and some real insights into the direction Microsoft is going, how it's viewing responsibility and its role in the world of regulation, as well as how they're building security and responsibility into their product set.
Yes, this is, and I think there's a few more things. I mean, it's very clear. There's agents everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing. The unleashing of AI and the democratization of it, that's just doubled down again today. But there were some very interesting things that have happened that have gone a little bit under the radar, I think, that are quite interesting, Dave. So I know you said everything's AI here, but they did actually announce some core changes to the operating system.
Oh, yeah. This is the stuff in response to CrowdStrike.
Yeah, so basically the resiliency drive, which is going to help fix things like that and stop them from happening, the ability to recover the machine much faster, and also the ability to patch without reboots and such like. So there's and if you think about it, and I know it's not as exciting as the others, but it is actually a really important foundational change to the core of what powers a lot of the world.
Yeah.
So that's a really good thing to hear. And there's also quite a lot around the personal experience change with the devices. And actually, they are talking about integrating augmented reality back in and MetaQuest 3, multiple monitors, all this sort of stuff. So they're having a go at that. And so this be
MetaQuest 3 attempting to create like augmented reality in the way that Vision Pro did.
Yeah, but it's integrated with Windows, so it's a joining of an ecosystem.
It'll be interesting to watch that, given Apple's recent announcement about Vision Pro.
Yeah, where they
whether that was just a price point issue or an experience issue.
I do actually think that was a price point issue.
Yeah.
I think what you've got with augmented reality and virtual reality is it is coming. It's just one of those very slow burn things before it suddenly takes off.
I don't know whether we've talked about this on the show before, but I did a demo of Vision Pro, just to digress for a second. And I was absolutely blown away by spatial photography.
I think the technology is good. It's just society needs to sort of edge towards it. You still look like a massive Wally with a headset on. Let's be clear. And you're not going to sit in the office with your headset on,
with my headset
on, having a meeting with a person.
It's unlikely. Let's face it. The actual design of the things needs to go a long way, but the sheer level of immersion, and then with the spatial photography thing, which effectively puts you into a photo. So you are like it's very much like in Blade Runner 2049, and at the end where Harrison Ford finds his daughter, and her job is basically to sort of craft the memories for the replicants, and she's like crafting a memory of a birthday party, and it was that resonant. I thought it was absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, no, it's clear the tech has got to a position where it's very compelling. It's just the societal leap to be able to use it on a daily basis. And the other things were, there is obviously an undercurrent of security and responsibility, which we'll be just talking about today. And actually the hackathon as well, where there's a £4 million prize up for grabs, which they're sponsoring as well, to kind of do the ethical view of let's try and hack it, find it, fix it before the nefarious crowd find it first, which I thought was quite cool.
Very good. Thank you for the observations, Robert. Now let's move to our conversations of the day, and we're going to start with a conversation with Rudra Mitra about Microsoft Purview and the Microsoft security stance around AI. We are being joined by Rudra Mitra, the CVP of Microsoft Purview. Rudra, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. Thanks for making time in what I'm sure is an extremely tight schedule this week.
It's a busy Ignite. There's so much to announce, so much to talk to customers and partners about. Excited to be here, but glad to make the time.
No, brilliant. Why don't we start a little bit with Purview itself? So for those who aren't familiar with what it is, why don't you just sort of set the table for us a little bit?
Awesome. So, if you think about the security offerings for Microsoft, we have a suite of products. We have Defender for threat protection. We have Entra for identity. We have Intune for device management. And one of the newest sort of additions to the suite is Purview. And Purview is focused on securing and governing data. And so if you think about intellectual property organizations have, data that they generate, data that AI generates. It's some of the most valuable assets that every organization manages, these days.
Right.
And so getting after that, protecting it, that's what Purview's mission is. And we like to talk about it as securing and governing the world's data.
I see. And just to drop down a layer, how does it actually function?
Yeah, so, we think about Purview as being a suite of solutions all working sort of together, better together to provide that data security. So data loss prevention, a lot of your listeners might be aware of. Insider risk management, which is about behavioral signals of users interacting with data and whether they're interacting with it in risky ways, approved ways. And then, of course, information protection, which is oriented around data classification, the sensitivity of the data. And we bring these together in a suite with capabilities called adaptive protection. So you're not just stuck with different sort of point solutions that I mentioned earlier, but we tie them together with adaptive protection. And so an example of that would be if a user that's interacting with sensitive data has been demonstrating risky behavior, their data loss prevention controls will be much stricter or can be elevated dynamically. Versus, if it's just run-of-the-mill interaction with data or it's not sensitive data, you can keep the data protection controls at a much more normal level. So this is the way sort of across data security, we think about a suite of products working together to protect your sensitive assets.
And we spent some time with your colleague Aaron yesterday talking about the Azure data stack. One of the things that we spent a good few minutes on was the complexity of getting your arms around your organization's data. It's something that sort of eluded a lot of large enterprises for the last, let's say, 2 or 3 decades. Because every time you get into it, it's so organic. There's such a massive amount of it. It's so complex. How have you come at that problem in terms of implementing something like a series of security layers where presumably there's a fair bit of structure in that, but you're applying it to quite organic data sets?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's a deep question for sure. So a couple of thoughts. So one of the key announcements we have at Ignite this year is data security posture management. Being added to the Purview suite. And so, like your question alluded to, when you think about data risk, part of the problem is that you don't get to protect what you can't see.
Right.
And so you have to uncover where the risk is, where is the sensitive data, who are the risky users interacting with the data. So, we're launching this capability at Ignite this year, DSPM, Data Security Posture Management in Purview, that's intended to illuminate sort of where those risks lie and a single pane of glass across the solutions I was mentioning. The other sort of dimension to the question you asked is data estates are vast, right? And there's lots of data, whether it's in structured systems, unstructured systems. And this is something I think we're doing quite unique in Purview, which is it's not just the data security piece. We call it data security and governance. And the governance piece is mapping your data, being able to catalog it, the sensitivity across structured systems, unstructured systems. And in some ways, I think Purview is quite unique to anything else in the market because customers might be thinking about a separate data security point solution from a governance solution. And we really try to bring them together. And AI is on our mind, and I think it's going to get to what you're asking about, which is the sprawl of data estates.
And what's nice about what you're talking about there with the adaptive security and then it's in one place being able to get hold of all of it is that a lot of organizations struggle with that structure and they're stuck in rigidity, but understanding your data, cataloging it, governing it, then you can exploit it and make it work for you. But also you've got the security tapped in that will vary, so you're not in this rigid security structure around your data as well, which is quite nice. It's a big leap for many organizations to start to work in that way. So it's
and the thing we often talk to customers about is you can start your security journey on the data security side. You can start it on the governance side. We want to be quite flexible and meet them where they are. But at the end of the day, data is only useful if you can activate it for business and protect it.
Yeah,
right. One or the other is relatively easier to do. The two together, I think, as you were saying there, is really, I think, the unlock as we think about an AI first era.
Well, let's use that exactly as a bridge into the speed of innovation and adoption of AI. It's been said before, and I'm no doubt it will be said again. It's intense, and we talked about yesterday that just when you walk onto the marketplace floor here, it's every single stall is talking about AI. I don't think I've ever seen such a uniformity of subject at one of these conferences before. There's usually like a data section and a networking section and, some hardware and then various other tooling and cloud and stuff like that. Here, it's like uniformly AI. So within that speed of adoption, there must be risk being introduced into the system. And I wonder then how you're kind of intervening on that with your product. You know what I mean? So how are you managing to intervene to secure, to your point, it's unleashing data, but also securing data, but without getting in the way of the innovation pace?
Yeah, I really like that question. I mean, it certainly speaks to what every, I think, organization across the globe is thinking about, which is how to use AI to unleash sort of productivity, so everyone's leaning in. And I really like the way Satya talked about it yesterday at his keynote, where he talked about it as the middle innings of AI, which just shows it sort of the speed, I think, that you were referring to, which where things are. In a couple of years, we've gone from very early sort of conversations about AI to the middle innings already being here.
And if you think about that, when cloud was first introduced like 10 odd years ago, the move to the middle innings probably took 5 years.
And this is faster.
Yeah.
This is way faster.
Like, unbelievably fast.
Yeah, yes. And so back to your question then, we think about AI in security in sort of two dimensions, two sides of the coin. One is, of course, how do we empower the defenders, working with security tools to be more productive, thinking end to end. We often talk about things like at Microsoft, it's really an end-to-end security solution that we're trying to provide, not just point solutions. And so how does AI help those defenders is sort of one dimension. But of course, your other part of your question was the trustworthy adoption of AI is such a huge topic.
Right.
That's where we center, our security suite, and Purview is one part of the security suite, which is Purview being an enabler to the trustworthy adoption of AI, whether that's Copilot for sales or Copilot for M365 or Copilot in Fabric. We want to make sure, customers are confidently adopting those solutions.
And that's really interesting. Is the human able to, the trust points critical? If you don't trust your data and you don't trust the results of what's processed against your data, there's no point. And it's like, can all organizations build that trust as fast as the technology is moving? And those ones who embrace it early, they're going to really win. And those who maybe are a bit more reticent to trust might lose out.
Well, the other thing I wouldn't mind going on to as well on that point is like zooming out a little bit and just looking at sort of legal and compliance and regulation around AI generally. I mean, it's kind of always been the way that sort of regulation is going to lag behind in a sort of a commercial race. And as we've just been saying, this particular commercial race is at an accelerated level that we've probably never seen before. It's pretty unprecedented, I would say. Yeah. What's your perspective on regulation, legal and compliance at the moment, and then how you can leverage a tool like Purview to basically, I think, do two things. The first is, how does it help the regulatory community get up to speed and be able to keep us safe, or give guardrails at least? And then how does it help the organization be able to put new regulations in place as they do drop?
Yeah, so, of the two sides of the coin we talked about, let's talk about the trustworthy adoption of AI side to your question here.
Yeah.
And so regulation, I think it's working its way through what does it mean for AI. And there'll be a lot of, I think, progress there over time as well.
Yeah.
The thing that's, I think, quite mind-boggling is if you think about AI not just being finished solutions that Microsoft is producing with copilots and agents, but you have across the industry. You also have developers leaning in hard with AI, building their own apps, like, whether it's service chatbots or a web page with sort of a help bot on it. So, the scale at which AI is moving is, of course, incredibly fast, and then regulation is sort of catching up to that. Now, with all that said, the thing organizations need is policies and being able to demonstrably show that they've protected, their data with AI, or they've set the right access control for the data that AI should have access to. That's where Purview comes in. We are enabling organizations to have those policies. And so, the thing you want to do, I think, when you think about regulation is what can you demonstrate adherence with? Do you audit the access to the data? Do you know who's prompting the AI with what prompts? So that's where Purview squarely sits, which is being able to sort of demonstrate your policy around AI, being able to protect your data. In many cases, here's another sort of, I think, quite interesting thought process. AI generates unique data from the assimilation of many different input sources. So you could get quite unique outputs from what you've gotten as an AI prompt. What if that data is sensitive? How do you protect that? Right. What do you tell a regulator when they say, if that output data included patient data or, let's say, a passport number or a unique identifier for a citizen, have you protected it adequately? That's what I mean by trustworthy adoption of AI, and I think your question hints at.
Yeah, and there's always somebody in the organization who's worried about that risk, and the people who have the technology in their hands want to run fast. But there's that balance that if you slip up and you breach regulation, the consequences can be very serious. So if you don't put those guardrails in place early and make sure they're adhered to, then you can find yourself on the end of a nasty fine.
Yeah, right. And one thing that occurs to me always when talking to security professionals is the frustration that the security community generally have with being like an afterthought at the end of a process.
The greatest crime of the internet was they forgot to put security in it at the beginning.
Right.
And we are still suffering today from that.
Yeah, and it seems to me like if ever there has been a place for security to be completely embedded from the outset, this has got to be the one, hasn't it?
Yeah, totally right. And I think this is where we are so incredibly excited about the work on the security suite from Microsoft as a set of controls for AI, a set of protections for AI. I think this is one of the things that Microsoft's doing quite uniquely, which I'm very excited about, which is it's not just, innovate with AI like crazy. It's also think about those tools from early on that organizations need, whether that's model protection or prompt injection attacks or data security, as we were talking about, or policies, or auditing who's using the AI. I think it has to go hand in hand with the trustworthy adoption of AI. Otherwise, like you're pointing out, security teams are left scrambling.
Exactly. So let's pivot a little bit about AI being actually leveraged in security specifically, and transforming the threat landscape. What's your take on how the security sort of challenge is going to increase as a result of AI? And in the background of that, there's also quantum coming up fairly quickly, which is also going to introduce a series of challenges into the security landscape. So how are you guys framing that at the moment?
Yeah, so this is the other side of AI, which is how do we enable the defenders with AI to be sort of defending, better than ever before. And I think no one should be confused that the attackers, the folks that are trying to get in and breach organizations, they also have access to AI too. It's not just the good guys or the defenders. And so the speed at which attackers are moving is incredibly accelerated with AI as well.
Right.
And we think that the only way to enable defenders to move at the same speed is at the speed of AI. So this is why, within the security suite at Microsoft, we've enabled a Copilot, the security Copilot, which is a Gen AI sort of application to the security tools. And it's the force multiplier that we want to bring to security teams so that they have the best tools to be able to respond to these new kinds of attacks and breaches. And we've seen a tremendous sort of response to that. And the interesting thing is, at Microsoft, we train the AI on security signals. So it's AI that's very specific to security response. And as you heard in maybe some of their keynotes yesterday, we've seen security teams be up to 35% more efficient in their response times with the help of AI. So that's a very important topic.
What is the scariest threat change that you've seen in the time that you've been looking at, changing attack vectors and things like that?
Well, certainly, identity continues to be the sort of the beachhead for many, many attacks. And so it is still a landscape where the basic, I would say, of basics of identity, basics of sort of posture are sort of lacking in the industry sort of as a whole. So, the other announcement, I think, within the security sort of keynote yesterday you would have heard is we are really pushing hard on proactive posture for organizations as well. So that means, making sure you have multi-factor authentication, you have great sort of endpoint protection, you have phishing sort of filtering, and then enabling your defenders with AI to respond to those detections faster. That's sort of the new way of thinking about defending with security.
I'm glad you mentioned phishing, because it does seem to be that, there's a lot going on across all of the different vectors that you just talked about, but phishing in particular to me seems to be an area where the levels of sophistication are just through the roof. So from the very basics of creating a sort of spoofing phishing email to something like where, have you seen the where they used some form of real-time AI deepfake to intervene on a video call and pretend to be the CFO or something like that, and they ended up transferring a load of money in a particular account. Those things to me just seem like, how do you protect against something like that?
Have you noticed how phishing emails don't seem so obviously
they're
phishing?
not shonky anymore, are they? We used to laugh and joke about the quality of them.
Grammar's right.
You know why?
Grammar right.
Because a lot of that is AI generated now. And so that's how, the point we were making earlier, that's why they are so good. And so being able to respond with AI becomes that much more important. And so what I mean by that is you want to have great threat intelligence. This is why, Microsoft invests so much in gathering all of that signal across, all the different sort of organizations we protect. That's the basis of our threat intel.
Right.
And then how do you protect against these newer age attacks that you're talking about? That's being able to bring that intelligence sort of to the defense products, being proactive about the posture that you have. And frankly, also across all of our products, that's why we're infusing Security Copilot for the security defenders as well, so that they can see these new attacks and start to put up the controls or the protections that are needed.
I saw just on LinkedIn that a telecoms company in the UK has created an agent that is basically being trained to answer phishing telephone conversations.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, and it basically is like wasting the time of the attacker.
I like it.
So it's basically been designed to tie them up.
Love it.
Which I thought was kind of a novel approach.
You see, but if you reduce their capacity to attack through things like that, there's less they can do, isn't it? It's quite a nice change.
I'm glad you brought that up. I don't think many folks realize that the economies of the world, when you think about the biggest economies of the world, cybersecurity is like the third or fourth biggest sort of economy if you stack them all up, because there's just that much money to be made behind it. So the economics work in the attacker's favors. And so it's important to enable defenders to sort of, respond with the things you're talking about, which is disrupt those economics.
Yeah. And it's the same thing as I always thought was, why is spam still a thing? There's like the completely...
Because it's delicious. Different spam.
Oh, yeah. No, this is the electronic spam that arrives. Right. But it's a classic thing. You go, who clicks the spam link and buys the offer on? Somebody must do it. Otherwise, people wouldn't send it out. So there is money to be made from these things. And it's like... It's
unfortunate.
It's a sustained business model that please stop clicking spam links, everyone.
So maybe just to bring us to a bit of a close this morning, an elevated threat landscape, complexity in data, products coming out at a prodigious rate. What's your advice to CISOs who are trying to get their heads around how they elevate their defense mechanisms to deal with the new age that we're entering into?
It's a fantastic question. And what I would say is it's important to think about security platforms when you sort of think about new age and how you're going to defend against these very sophisticated attacks. And what I mean by platforms is, where security attackers sort of operate is in the margins or in the lines between different products. They don't sort of say, okay, I'm going to only do a phishing attack today and only a malware attack tomorrow. It's more end-to-end. It's across send a phishing attack to get an identity, to compromise something maybe on an endpoint that's not patched. So they really, our learnings at Microsoft is our researchers show that they often breach between these seams of products.
Right.
And so you really need a solution that's more end-to-end. And so, what I would say is it's important for CISOs to think about what that end-to-end protection is, Who are their providers that provide, solutions that integrate end to end? And frankly, back to our AI conversation, just kind of dwelling back on that for a second. This is why Security Copilot is not just about enabling defenders with an AI tool. It's about AI that reasons over end-to-end signal.
Right.
And I think thinking end-to-end and thinking about your platform bets on your security tools and response mechanisms, so important for SOCs. Otherwise, our data just shows that you have defenders, the SOC teams, spending more time curating data versus defending.
Right.
And the job needs to be being enabled to defend. And so you heard Charlie Bell, who's our EVP at Microsoft for security, talk about this yesterday. We're not just investing in AI for defenders. We're not just investing in security products. We're also thinking deeply about what's the foundational layer underneath all these products so that you have threat intelligence infused in, you have signals sort of end to end across these products. It's super important for CISOs to think strategically. I'm sure about that.
Fantastic. Thank you for your advice. And thank you for spending some time with us this morning. It was great to see you.
It's great to be here. The energy here at Ignite is awesome, and I'm glad to see you guys doing this, and engaging the audience.
Yeah, we love coming to conferences like this because you do get I think it gives you a real sort of temperature check on where the industry is, what's exciting everybody, where the buzz is coming from, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. And I'm glad you guys are back on doing big global events. It's good to see you.
Yeah, no replacement for interacting with customers and CISOs and CIOs and partners on the show floor here. The buzz is amazing.
I agree. I look forward to the shows every year just to walk around the marketplace.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And just see where people are gathering and what's going on. And this is a good one. Now, we are going to ask you perhaps the most important question of the day, which is we're in Chicago land. It is famous for deep pan pizza. We've been conducting a scientific study across the giants of deep pan pizza like Malnati's and Giordano's, which we're going to today. We've done Malnati's. Where do you stand on all of this important subject?
It's a very important topic. I'm glad we covered this one.
Yep.
I'm a traditionalist. That's just me personally.
Yeah.
So I'm more of a traditional pizza kind of guy.
Base.
The thin sort of style pizza. I've tried the deep dish. I will say that it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and
there's a lot under that.
I'm not sensing a lot of love. I'm not sensing a lot of love.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. The thing that surprised me about it was I was expecting the sort of thickness, but it was the fact that the crust is quite hard, like a pastry crust. That's the bit that caught me out.
I think that shocked you, actually. There was a moment in your life where the realisation...
I haven't got over it yet.
Yeah, I think what you did was you set your expectation on the deep pan extremely high.
I did.
Yeah.
And you were talking about it, and then it was very tasty, I found, but I think the crust was your biggest disappointment.
I think you might be right. So Marcel and I are going to go and do Giordano's today as part of, obviously,
I'm actually quite excited to hear what your scientific research turns up.
Yeah. Well, we'll be reporting back.
When he says scientific, it's
structured is maybe a better word.
Yeah, maybe structured.
We're approaching it professionally.
Yeah,
I think
we are.
fine.
You're making sure you cover all the bases, which means you're fair in your analysis.
Exactly.
Which is important.
Well, look, thanks again, man. Have a great conference.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. I appreciated it.
With us today, I am delighted to say we have Dr. Sarah Bird, who's the Chief Product Officer at Microsoft for Responsible AI, and Yina Arenas, who's a VP for Azure AI Foundry, a brand new title, I think you'll find, Yina?
Indeed, we unveiled yesterday.
It's incredibly exciting, so we'll be talking about that shortly. But before we get to that, how are you guys doing? Are you enjoying Ignite so far?
Yeah, it's amazing to be here. I love hearing how people are putting AI into practice and changing the world. And it's, a great place to see that happening.
As you were just saying, Dan, is AI everywhere. So we're excited to be here. It's the moment and having a great time.
It is wall to wall, isn't it? And we were reflecting, I think, yesterday with one of your colleagues, Aaron, about it's nice to be back in doing these global conferences, because I think this is the first one that Microsoft's done since the pandemic at global scale, isn't it? They've done summits and stuff like that, but this is the first big one for a while.
Yes.
This is the first time we've gotten out of Seattle, and so we're liking the variety. Chicago's a great city.
Right. Isn't it just?
It's big, isn't it, though? It's a massive city. I never thought it would be as big as it is. You turn up, it looks like Batman, Gotham, which is ace, and then it goes on forever.
It's so funny. I was thinking the opposite because I came from New York and I have not been here in 10 years, and it was bigger in my memory than maybe how it stacks up against New York.
Really? I think it's huge.
Where are you from, Yina?
I am from Colombia.
Colombia, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you still based there? So you flown in?
No,
from
I'm based in Seattle right now.
Right, very nice. Yeah, I do like Chicago. Does have a good vibe about it. I do like it, and we'll come back to one of the things that Chicago's legendary for later on in the conversation. But maybe you can help us by just setting out your areas of responsibility and what you look after specifically at Microsoft. So, Sarah, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, I have a pretty interesting job. I look at how Microsoft implements AI in a way to ensure that we're doing that responsibly, that AI is trustworthy. So I partner really closely with our Chief Responsible AI Officer, Natasha Crampton, who leads our policy efforts to figure out what we need to do, both, what are the standards we're setting for ourselves? What are the standards now the world is setting for us as we see AI regulation coming out? And then I'm responsible for figuring out how we actually put that into practice. Now, of course, it's not as clean as that. We have to work super closely together because part of figuring this out is figuring out how we design policy that we can actually implement. And implementation tells us a lot about how we need to design the policy. And so we work back and forth on that.
It's such a critical axis. Interested in your day-to-day. So you're working with like people and advisors and things like that outside of Microsoft, and then trying to bring, kind of best practices and harvested like issues that you need to solve for into the process.
Yeah, there's a couple of things we do. So the first part of my team works really close with Microsoft research and external academics and things. And what we're looking at is for any new AI technology, what types of risk are emerging? And then how are we going to actually go about addressing those risks? How do we test for them? How do we mitigate them? And so that looks a lot like state-of-the-art applied research. And of course, we, figure out how we do this ourselves, but we also learn from everyone else in the industry who's figuring that out. But then, of course, it's not enough to just figure out how to do this. We want to make it easy for everyone to do. So the rest of my team then takes these practices and figures out how we build them into our tools, our technologies, into best practices that everybody can easily adopt so that we can both ship AI responsibly at Microsoft, but also make it easy for people who are building on our AI systems to do the same.
Yeah, the second you make it a secondary concern or something else that somebody has to do, you can sort of forget about the fact it's going to get done, can't you? So I think embedding it is the way to go.
Yeah, we want things to be safe by default. And, it's sort of a false dichotomy to think of it on the side. You cannot do sort of AI without doing responsible AI. Mm-hmm. So much of building a trustworthy AI system is actually just getting the core quality right, ensuring that the system works the way users expect it to, and it works well every time. And so if you're thinking about it as an after effect, you're not going to build a good product.
Right. Exactly.
It's that trust point as well, isn't it? If you build it and there isn't trust and people don't know that safety around it, then they may fear to use it, etc. So getting that in at the beginning helps organizations sort of learn to embrace it a bit more.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing that we're seeing, which is there's an enormous amount of excitement around this technology. But at the same time, we're hearing loud and clear from the world that they have concerns. And, some of those are coming because the technology itself is so easy to personify because you directly interact with it and it speaks human language. And so it starts feeling like the sci-fi films we all grew up watching. And so maybe some of that is overhyped. But on the same side, we're using the technology for really important things already every day. And that can have an impact on people's lives. And so it is absolutely important that we get it right from the beginning or we're going to struggle to use this technology successfully.
Well, let's hold that thought, and we'll return to responsible AI transformation and the complex web of stuff around it very shortly. But why don't you set out your area and what you're looking at, and the big exciting announcement of the week?
Sounds good. So my role is all about unlocking AI transformation. If you think about it, AI has been around for like over 50 years. I mean, we've been working on, doing machine learning and doing neural networks and, for a long time.
Right.
But about 2 years ago, it hit an inflection point, right? Where no longer working on AI was a role exclusively for machine learning professionals and data scientists, but now every single developer has the power to just go and like use AI into their applications.
Right.
So my role is all about how do we get every single developer on the planet to build with AI and infuse it in every single app, whether it's apps that they've been writing for a while or like the new apps that we're going to get to create.
And that was a big theme from the keynote, democratization and empowerment of the individual. It's now in the hands of everyone, which I suppose raises the game on the responsible AI, which means it's now everywhere. So we need to make sure we get it absolutely right at the same time.
And Foundry, I think, is at the heart of that responsible building effort.
Exactly at the heart of that. So like this is one of our big announcements this as part of Ignite is Azure AI Foundry. So it is the place where we are bringing together all of the entire tools that developers need, from discovery to like model selection. We have extensive model catalog. We have, of course, our main partnership with OpenAI, serving all of their models as part of our platform. But not only that, models from Mistral, from Cohere, from Llama, from AI21 Labs, from many other providers, including task-specific models and industry-specific models. And the tool chain, so you start by model selection, then you also need to think about the tool chain. How you think about evaluation, how do you think about monitoring, how do you think about observability, all of these different things end to end that are like, think about an overlay of what developers have been doing when building their applications. What are the concerns that they now need to think about as they bring AI into their apps? And making sure that they have that end-to-end tool chain.
And Yina, you missed my favorite part,
of course,
which is we built in, of course, safety and security guardrails, right? We want people to start from a fantastic foundation and then, of course, have the evaluation and monitoring so that you know that those are actually working effectively both before you ship and after you ship.
And experimentation, right?
Yes,
like being able to like understand once the application is out there, how it's behaving. And like as you're upgrading between one model and the other, like if you look at the rate at which new models are coming up in market, it is outstanding. So
one of the things I loved about the Foundry announcement actually was the model marketplace and like being able to integrate models from multiple different areas to be able to leverage in the tools you're building. Just as a little side query on that, because I've been wondering about data sources and being able to import data sources and use them. Is the process of accepting something into the marketplace, have you built into that process a way of checking the validity and accuracy of the data? How does that onboarding work? That's like one half of the question, and the other half of the question that I've been sort of thinking about, and you guys building it into Foundry in this way has really, kind of brought it home to me, which is the emergence of a commercial market around model reuse and almost like data islands that you can then sort of bring into models. So dig into those subjects a little bit for me and where you guys are going with it.
I will answer that question in two parts. One is the partnership that we have with all of the different model providers and how do we bring them into the platform for them to be then exposed as part of our model catalog, right? So we have a very close partnership with many different model providers across the industry. And we are also like having partnerships with like industry leading organizations that are doing customization of like foundation models or open source models to then like have industry specific offerings. So that is one end. And then the other end is like once those models are available in the catalog, what can customers do with them, right? Like can you take that model and customize it for a particular need, right? Like so, and we have all of the tools that enables you to do that, like from fine tuning a model, doing distillation and being able, and that's where the data comes in, right? Like you having your own data, being able to bring that in to like, further do tuning on that model so that it like is specifically optimized for a particular use case.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit to that as well. So one of the things that's important is we want to make sure we're making a variety of things available, because if you look at whether or not a model is suitable or the data it was trained on is suitable, that's going to vary by use case, right? So we want to provide sort of maximum options so that people can actually find the right thing for their application. But we do want them to be able to use models that they trust. And so, we've partnered with Hidden Layer Model Scanner, and we scan the models we bring into our catalog for security vulnerabilities, so people have that confidence up front. And we benchmark the models so people can understand how they're working on industry-leading benchmarks. We're adding a safety benchmark to that as well, so you can help find the model that's right for you.
Yeah, that's great.
And as we're moving into a world where AI is regulated, for example, the first milestones in the EU AI Act are coming up in this next year.
Yep.
We're working to expand our model catalog so that it has the right information that you're going to need for regulation when you're adopting it and building on top of it. So very much we want to make sure that the catalog is something where you can get all of the information you need to get the right model and use it confidently.
And what was nice to see as well, the industry models and the partnerships with industry, helping them bring those in as well for specific sector focus, which I thought was a big shift to say that if you're in life science, here's a model tailored to you by the experts.
I think the other thing that's great about the close partnerships is that we can give feedback to them in terms of what we're finding, what we're hearing it works well for, where there's limitations and things. And so it's helping all of us get stronger building high quality models.
And from a customer perspective, one of the things that we announced at the conference is the ability you talked about benchmarks, right? Like the ability to do evaluations, not just looking at the industry specific benchmarks, but also like using your own data to do evaluations of models, right? Like, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm on a soapbox about this. All I do at every talk now is say, hey, before you ship an AI system, you should test it.
Right.
Okay, now it doesn't sound that controversial when you say it.
It sounds quite sensible.
Yeah, exactly. But what you find is actually the ability to evaluate AI systems is something that we've often seen, only really expert teams able to do. Yeah. But as Yina said earlier, we're trying to empower every developer on the planet because this technology can just be game-changing for people. And so we have to help everybody be able to adopt these evaluation best practices. And so we've built evaluation into the Foundry, and it allows you to test for different quality metrics as well as built-in testing for risk and safety. And so we've worked with experts to identify how do you test for a particular type of risk and actually build what some people often call automated red teaming that probes your system and sees how well it responds to these risks and sort of gives you a score on how well your system is doing. And so we're building tools like this to make it easy to say, okay, once I've picked a model and, I like how it looks on paper, let's really test it in my application with my data and see if it's really meeting the metrics I care about.
So I want to return back to something you touched on there, which is about regulation. And as you said, the EU Act kind of imminent at this point. But what I think it's fair to say is that the commercial arms race, if you like, around AI innovation, AI product, and then how it's being adopted by organizations the world over is ahead of regulation at the moment. Given the potential, risk that comes with AI, and obviously there's a spectrum here. Like some people would think it's just, kind of a modern version of RPA. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, which says, is this the beginning of Skynet and actually what's going to happen? What's your perspective on that, Sarah, as somebody that's kind of in that world and thinking about those things?
Yeah, I think I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but one of the things I think is so important for people to think about in this conversation is actually the risk that comes with not bringing this technology to the world quickly. There's so much it can do in terms of changing the game for individuals, for organizations, and for society. And so we have to think about that first. What are we actually achieving in the conversation? And so I'd actually love to kick it over to Yina to tell us a bit more about what we're seeing as far as the impact of the technology.
It is just, to me, mind-blowing to see the amount of customers and the set of scenarios that are unfolding with applied AI. We have maybe the mental model because of what we've seen with chat-based interactions is like people go and fixate their heads towards that. Mm-hmm. But AI is way more than that, right? Like we are seeing applications in healthcare. We're seeing applications in finance, in legal, in you name the industry. One of our partners is working on We recently released the GPT real-time audio model, and one of our partners is working on like how do they can bring this into healthcare. And one of the things that they're doing is instead of like sending these surveys to like have patients fill out all of the forms so that they can see a medical professional, can they do this through a like real-time conversation with a patient, right? Like where it's more familiar to them, it's easier for them to like, go and answer these questions. It's like little details than that is like, I think it goes beyond like I will send some question to a chat-based agent, like, or a chat-based interface and expect some text back. That, it's just, it goes beyond the impact is just tremendous across all of our different industries. When it comes to legal, we're seeing like how it brings, like the information that they have to navigate across precedents in cases and all of these different things, and being able to like bring that to bear to the legal professional who needs the information at hand. Similar to like, medical professionals in like, think about like, for example, if they don't have a radiologist at hand, like imagine, places where like access to like a specific, what is that word?
You want just specialists?
It's a specialist. Yeah, specific specialist. Like if they don't have specialists at hand, like they can like rely on AI to bring in information to the practitioner that is there, and like being able to like help diagnose or help drive like direction to that case, right? Like so there are so many set of use cases that around AI that go beyond just like a chat-based experience.
And that productivity boost from allowing the specialist to go to the bit where they need to be and get technology to remove the toil and be accurate on that, it would be massive, because now you can do the really high value stuff and not worry about the stuff that you would normally have to do. And now you can let technology take it away from you.
Yeah, that's what we saw. One of the first generative AI applications we shipped was GitHub Copilot. This is before ChatGPT, so when most of you were not paying any attention to this. And, it's been out a little while, and so we have some data on this, and exactly, developers said they feel 40% more productive. And the thing that's really important to me in my work is that 70% of them felt that they were more satisfied with their work. And it's exactly removing the pieces that are rote and automatable that you don't want to be doing, so you can focus on where you're adding your unique value.
Right.
Now, I promised we would talk about the risk, though, so I don't want to just totally ignore that. But if we look at what happened with ChatGPT, right? None of you, as I said, were paying any attention when GitHub Copilot came out. Maybe some of you listening, but the rest of the world, maybe not.
Right.
And so as far as, how the technology should be regulated, what role we want it to have in society, what role we do not want it to have, it's really hard for anybody to participate in that conversation if they're not familiar with the technology. And so it was game changing when we had an interface that was easy to use, that everybody could just try and get their hands on the technology and say, like, this is what it's going to be great for. This is what I'm worried about. And so part of getting it out there quickly is because we need everybody in the conversation about how we're going to govern this as a society. And it's very hard to do that if we keep the technology in an ivory tower. But of course, we do need to do that in a way that manages the risk appropriately. We don't want to just throw it out there in any sort of context, right? And so we, for example, build a defense in depth approach that both has sort of mitigations by design, but also rapid response capabilities. So as we're releasing it and we discover new risk, we can adapt very quickly. And then, of course, we start by testing it internally and then with a small group of trusted people and scale it up so that we can get confidence in our systems overall. And so another thing about going quickly in this space that we think is important is that, so Microsoft, it may feel quick to many people. We've been working in AI and even in responsible AI for many, many years now. And so we have been building a foundation for years that enables us to move quickly now. So we've been preparing for this moment for a long time. And the reason I'm so excited about it is because the people that are going first set the standard for the industry. And I do not want the standard to be some random AI company doing it in a way that's not trustworthy, because we're not going to get all the benefit of AI if we induce fear in the technology. And so I think it's so important to get out there and set the standard at a really high bar that, the world is going to expect of us as technologists.
Yeah, I agree. And where do you, unchecked, where do you think it could get to? So let's say the scenario, the counter strategic of it is you do have an irresponsible AI company that's out there, because the technology is so accessible. Where do you think that could go? And what are the counter strategic that you guys are trying to manage against?
We see kind of two categories of challenges that people are concerned about. One is actually accidental or unintentional misuse of the technology. And this comes when people just don't understand what it does or where it's appropriate to use. So for example, there's the kind of famous cases. I don't know why all the examples are lawyers, but there were several cases right away of lawyers not understanding what ChatGPT did or didn't do.
A made up case law.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not working out real well. And so it's important that we're empowering people to use the technology correctly and they understand, and that we're holding them accountable for the use of the technology. And so that's one side of it. Now, on the other side, of course, is that we are seeing, a growing number of threat actors and attacks in the world. And they find intentional ways to sort of misuse and abuse the technology. And so one of the important things that we're doing there is actually the technology is incredibly powerful for defense as well. And so making sure that we are, proactively fighting back with AI and using the most powerful systems we have to defend against those intentional misuse of the technology.
Very good, very good. So thank you for that. And it's tricky subject matter to talk about, but I think it is right to talk about it. So thank you for going there. Maybe to bring our conversation to a bit of a close, I'm interested then in what you're seeing at the moment in organizations themselves, like consuming organizations, as we get to the phase. I think it was described by Satya yesterday as the middle innings of AI and its adoption, which we've gotten to very, very quickly. And in my head, to rephrase that slightly, is the move from sort of the proof of concept phase, so little technical proof of concepts running within IT, and the sort of larger scale AI transformation pieces. Now, I thought I'd introduce this by referring to a really funny little reel that I saw this morning. So bear with me while I get this. Yeah, it was. I was just going to credit the person who did it. So it was at Alberta Tech, and it was on Instagram. And the joke that she was making was she was sort of pretending to be somebody who worked in a sparkling water company, and she was on the phone, and she was talking to somebody else, and she'd just been given the job title of head of AI innovation. And she's like, well, so I used to be head of bottling. So now who's looking after head of bottling? And how do I find my time to do AI innovation? What does that look like? And then she's like, okay, so where's bottling now as a priority for the company? Is it second? And they'd be like, oh, third. Well, what's second? Well, more AI. So I thought that was an absolutely skewering of the issue at the moment, which is that it's thrown around a lot. But what does AI transformation really mean to you guys beyond job titles?
I mean, I think that definitely AI is here it is an inflection point in human history, right? But I also think that there is a hype around what people think that it will do. Right. And I think is in those little cases where it really delivers delightful or really transforming efficiency on the things that you do. I'll give you an example. For me, a feature in Microsoft 365 Copilot, specifically in Teams, was just a delight. I mean, how many times my calendar is booked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Right. Many times triple booked. And I started taking the habit while we were in COVID to just ask people to record the meetings and then watch the meeting in 2x, right? A meeting that was 1 hour, I will I spent 30 minutes catching up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then the Teams Copilot integration in Teams come up with meeting Copilot, and then you don't need to get the watching the video at 2x. I can just go there, see the actions, see the transcript. If I want to scan it, I can ask Copilot what were the key discussion points. So that we came up with an hour meeting to 30 minutes to watching the video in 2x to 3 minutes. Amazing. And just catching up with the meeting, right?
Summarization.
Yeah,
is such a brilliant capability, and you can go over a large corpus of audio and video and get the
just
key
get
points.
the bits,
Incredible.
Just get the key things that you want. So examples like that, when you can drive, like that is a time efficiency. Time is our most precious resource, right? So like, again, back to the hype, I think there is sometimes people just overhype it, but it's like, it will be in those small cases where you can really drive efficiency, when you can really augment what the human is able to do and like, empower them to do like more, right? And so I think that that's an area where we'll continue to see more. Yes, there is this hype of like what all of their expectations, but we're starting to see like more and more enterprises like narrow down on those use cases.
Yeah. And it's a muscle memory, isn't it? So when you first get given access to something like Copilot, you have to personally learn how to use it effectively and what works for you. Yeah. So there's this education that has to go on across the world that says, actually, I can use this for better. And then remembering to use it.
Yeah. There's going to be an adoption curve.
Yeah. And there's, I think, a lot that organizations need to do at every level. So we hear a lot from organizations that we're working with around, one, how do they transform their culture so that they're actually looking at how to innovate and where to innovate? Like a lot of these businesses might have been in a steady state for a while, but now they're looking at how can they radically transform them with AI. And that takes a different culture in an organization.
And change management.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next level, I was sitting with the CISO of KPMG, and he was sharing a journey that's very similar to Microsoft, which is you need to bring together the company leadership to talk about both the benefits of the technology and the risk and how to navigate those trade-offs for your organization. Because if you only look at it on one side, then you're not going to make the right decisions. And so a lot of organizations don't have this muscle right now to have those deeper conversations and bring everyone into the room. And so like that's another level that you need to do. And another thing that we see, for example, is that it really is a transformation and you have to change a lot of your practices. And they're things that organizations should have been doing already. So for example, when a lot of people adopt M365 Copilot, they then start realizing that they have some debt in their data management practices, right? And so they're saying the AI is not respecting, what's confidential data or not, but it's actually that they were not actually using that correctly. And so the organization is going to be stronger and safer when they adopt these practices for all of their systems, whether they're using AI or not. But AI is really driving the urgency around doing that. And so we see transformation occurring kind of at every level, from, culture down to data management, down to like reskilling workers and things. And so it really is a large transformation that's occurring in organizations that are trying to lead the way with AI.
Well, I think that's a great place to pause our conversation for today. So thank you both for taking the time to join us this morning and share your insights. It was great to see you.
Did you want to ask us about pizza?
Oh yeah, that's coming, don't worry.
Okay.
That's coming next. So you introduced it, so let's just jump on that. So we're in Chicago, and it's known for its deep dish pizzas, and we've been asking all of our guests the important subject of where do you stand on the deep dish pizza. So, Eunice, have you had a chance while you've been here to try one, and what was your perspective of it?
Not this time around, but in previous times that I've been in Chicago, yes. And I have to say, I love cheese. So the amount of cheese in the deep dish pizza is just, over the moon. However, my favorite is a thin crust pizza. So I'm
sort of New York style, Neapolitan style.
I will go with Neapolitan style. Again, thin crust, not necessarily super heavy on toppings and things like that. Yep. Yeah, that's my go-to when it comes to pizza. So sorry to disappoint everyone in Chicago, but I'm not going to go with that one as my favorite.
One score for Neapolitan. So now, Sarah, I understand that you've given some thought to this question and have a perspective coming from Detroit. So
yeah, this is a risky topic for me because I already have kind of allegiances built in. Right. I grew up in the Detroit area, and I think they make an excellent style of pizza also, which people are starting to now be more aware of. And I live and have lived for the last 10 years in New York, and in fact right next to some famous pizza institutions. And it would be risky for me to really embrace a Chicago style pizza. So I'm gonna stay with my home bases here.
Now, if we then just focus on Detroit and New York and see where I'm going to go with this. If you could only choose one to have for the rest of your life, where would you go?
It would be smart for me to choose New York because I live there and it's more accessible.
Safe choice, yes. Yeah.
Where would you be your recommendation in New York for like an excellent New York style?
Well, I live right next to the, sort of famous like Giuliana's Pizza and things in Brooklyn.
Very nice.
So definitely recommend them.
Brilliant. Look, I think we've tackled all the big topics, haven't we? Especially that last one.
Or toppings, Dave.
Hey, look at that.
I'm here all week.
Guys, thank you very much for that. Great to see you today, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And with us this afternoon, I'm delighted to say we have Scott Hanselman. He's a VP at Microsoft and looks after the developer community. Scott, how are you doing? Good to see you.
I am well blessed. I just literally walked off stage and I walked directly here to hang out with you.
What were you presenting about? What was your theme of the...
I was just presenting with two PMs from GitHub Copilot on basically GitHub Copilot inside Visual Studio. I tried to do a little bit more of a reality check, and I actually started out and I said, does anyone want to see any slides? And they all said no and started to boo.
Brilliant, yes.
And I said, when we'll do no slides, and we did the entire thing live. All the demos are live, nothing canned.
Nice.
3 laptops, 3 developers, 45 minutes tight. Not a slide in the show.
Very good. And did all the demos go as expected?
Yep.
No technical hitches?
Yep, there are no demo gods. There is only prepared or not prepared.
I like it. So there is no glitches. It's just being prepared.
Yeah, I mean, but see, this is the thing, right? LLMs, large language models, are not deterministic. So if it doesn't do something that you'd expect, then that's an opportunity for learning.
Yeah.
So if it goes left and you wanted it to go right, you have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
If a demo works perfectly, then it makes the audience feel like it's canned.
Right.
Yeah.
So it has to be real, and then the audience might go, oh, wait a second, this didn't do exactly what I thought. Let's talk about why.
Oh, that's very cool. It sort of brings it to life a bit more, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I try to do only live shows.
I like that too. And you're no stranger to podcasting, I understand.
I do have a podcast. My last name is Hanselman, and my podcast is called Hansel Minutes. And I've done...
See what you did there.
That's it.
You like that?
Yeah,
it's actually because I'm a really bad estimator.
Right.
And my podcasts used to go long, and now they're just a tight 30 minutes.
And there's no parallel there to developers and their ability to say how long a process is going to take to write code. That's baked into software, isn't
100%
it?
that people would say, hey, is that 30 minutes or 30 Hansel minutes, which could be as long as a week.
Right.
Yeah, but it's an interview show. It's kind of like fresh air, but it brings faces that you don't usually see to the forefront.
Very nice. And you also do one of the Microsoft shows as well.
I do have a show called Azure Friday, which I've done 750 episodes, and that's a video podcast with demos where I talk not to the marketing people, to the actual developers who work on features on Azure.
Cool.
And then I just launched another podcast called Scott and Mark Learn To with Azure CTO Mark Rusinovich.
Right.
And each week we learn to do something different.
Oh, and is that to do with like the software stack, or could it be like, I'm going to do crochet this week?
Learn how to bake a good lasagna.
So last week we learned how to influence without authority.
Oh, cool.
The week before we learned how to not ship the org chart. And this week we're releasing an episode called Scott and Mark Learn About Skincare. Because we're both over 50 and we think that people don't think about that.
It's about I've just started working on core strength.
Yeah.
I'm also over 50, unfortunately. And it was like, earlier in the year I injured my knee. And it was the most minor injury, but it's taken so much kind of getting over that I'm like, I better actually take this seriously and address it. So yeah, core strength.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go, Robert.
Is that a top tip, David? Skincare and core strength. What have we learned today? There you go.
Exactly.
I think the larger part is just maintenance.
Maintain. You have to do more active maintenance as you go along.
Giant flesh bags under pressure, and they
right.
need to maybe be maintained.
That is right. Well, look, on to business. Tell us a little bit about developer communities, Scott, and your role within that.
Okay, so I was born... No, that's probably too far back.
This isn't Hansel minutes. This is proper American minutes.
Yeah. So for context, I've been a developer for 32 years. A lot of people measure that from like when they got their first computer. I am measuring it from when I got my first paycheck.
Yeah.
So I've been a developer, since 1992, and certainly before that another 10 years with the ZX Spectrum or the C64s. But I've been developing for that long, and it was the community that made me feel welcome. I always wonder, now that I'm on the twilight or the end of my career, as I've got another maybe 5 or 10 years left, how did I make it this long?
Yeah,
and I think it is because I didn't get chased out. I didn't get bullied. I was welcomed. I was excited. And I had places to hang out with people. I went to user groups. I used to sit in the basement of a fire department and we would play with Commodore 64s. And we had clubs and get-togethers. And then now we have Discord and we have social media. And it's always been very welcoming and very kind. Only recently did we hear about the idea of toxicity, within such things. Yeah. So if I, as kind of just an average straight white guy from the West Coast, was really welcomed, I want everyone to be welcomed into technology. So what can we do to make the person who has 5 years experience have 30? And what we need to do is we need to welcome them, teach them a lot of stuff, make them feel powerful so that they stick around, so that in 30 years they're on your podcast talking about how welcoming the community was. So our job at developer community is to make that happen.
And it's the thing I always liked about software was it's in a very creative process as well. So it allows people to sort of build things from scratch easily. Yeah, and I like that creation. I think that's often misunderstood why people love coding so much. It's because, it's that creative but engineering at the same time.
It's the feeling of being powerful as well. And I only recently, as my dad is retired and he's like, 70, 78 probably, is that he's a woodworker. He's not a he's a firefighter and a woodworker. My mom was a zookeeper. So there's no tech in our background. And him tinkering in the garage with his woodworking tools is me tinkering in my garage with my Raspberry Pis. Right. It's the same thing. Like, we're the same guy. And I always wondered, maybe I went in a different direction and became a computer person. No. I'm a person who wants to make stuff. I want to build stuff. So 3D printing, woodworking, he was whittling with a stick and making, Native American archery, bows. And I make, retro arcade machines with a CNC machine. But we're the same guy.
You're right. It's the gist is exactly the same.
And I feel very powerful in that, because if I want to build a chest of drawers, I can do that.
So what are you seeing when you cast forward, especially with, the advent of our favorite 2-letter acronym, coming into supporting the development community, coming into kind of writing code, natural language? How do you see it evolving? So the next generation of Scott, what's he making in his garage in 30 years' time?
So for me, 30 years ago, it was basically a couple of books and maybe CompuServe or America Online or the Usenet, and you would go and put a note up there, or you'd email, Donald Knuth, and then you'd wait 2 weeks for a reply. Then it was Stack Overflow, and now it's having an ongoing conversation with a co-pilot. Imagine where I would be if I could sit at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night and talk to a mentor that is infinitely patient and infinitely kind, that's going to walk me through stuff. Hey, explain this code base to me. I don't understand that. What's a hash table? And it would never tire. I think I would be even farther. So I am hoping that we're building that for the next generation of developers.
And beyond that, do you have a vision in mind for what the evolved developers' skill set will become?
So I feel very strongly that I am not a fan of what a lot of the Gen Z perspective on what AI should look like. I see stuff like, I'm just going to draw it on the back of a napkin and then vibe with the AI and it's going to ship the thing. I am very much feel like systems thinking is the thing. Yeah. Okay. And I don't mean to be like old man who shakes fist at cloud, but there is value in knowing how to drive stick shift.
Yes, isn't it? I often talk about this. As you abstract, do the people coming in today really understand how the underlying thing that's making their vision appear actually work? Because when it goes wrong, we still need people who understand it to fix it, to reintegrate it.
Phrased differently, there's not a lot of software engineers on The Walking Dead.
Yeah, no.
Right? The people on The Walking Dead know how to chop wood and carry water.
Right.
Nobody's really there to reboot the router. But I feel like, imagine an episode of The Walking Dead with a really good network engineer, and they find they find a cache of Raspberry Pis and they build a generator, and they build it intranet.
This is the thing, when the end comes, it's going to be somebody with a floppy disk in a drawer, they take it out and they restart everything.
And a ham radio operator.
Yeah.
So that's useful knowledge. And I feel like if a young person says, what should I learn? Should I learn React or should I learn, Angular? It's no, you should learn JavaScript. You should get comfortable with it. And then, this is super important, go one layer below your comfort zone.
Right.
Right? Press F12 in the browser. Okay, you've done that. Maybe look at C. Maybe look at C++. I'm not saying be a full stack developer. The stack's too large.
Yeah, but you have to understand it, don't
Pop your trunk once, change your oil once, change your tires once, and then pay a guy to change your tires. But you got to know that that happens. If the car breaks down and you don't know how to change a tire, I'm using this as an extended analogy.
Right.
Then what are you going to do? So like process, ports, TCP/IP, HTTP, I don't see that being abstracted away. Like it's always going to be DNS. In 50 years, it'll still be DNS's fault. So you should know that.
Oh, yeah, it's always the network's fault generally.
But yeah, I think you make a powerful point. And just speaking from personal experience, all of my background, I've also been in technology for 30 years. So, and all my background was basically in infrastructures, like building data centers. And so then when the cloud came along, I felt like I had an innate understanding of how it functioned. So, I couldn't necessarily go and write an elastic stack, but I basically knew how it was working, how it was connecting. So therefore it was easy to make the leap to a new set of technologies.
Yeah, 100%. I tell this joke and I'll tell it to you now, which is because I've been in tech for so long, I have a 3-page resume. They always tell you to have a 1-page resume, but there's so much I've done. I'm a rock star.
Right.
So, with tongue in cheek, I have a 3-page resume. But then I realize page 2 is racking servers, connecting a Cisco local director or an F5 and setting up a round robin DNS. And then I realized, wow, all of page 2 is now a checkbox in Azure. So now I have a 2-page resume.
Right.
That was easy, wasn't it? Yeah.
You just rip out the 90s. All of the 90s is gone. But I don't feel sad about that. We perfected how to do that kind of scale. Right. We made it a checkbox or we made it a slider bar. Yeah. And now the young person doesn't have to learn that. And that's kind of cool. They're sitting on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's literally how evolution works in this sort of situation. So is page 3 like special interests and hobbies?
Mostly just 3D printing at that point. Yeah. But it's like whatever new thing is out. Another way to think about it is that whatever your degree is, everyone's like, what should I study in my degree? What should I study after my degree? Every single thing other than C that I learned in my degrees is gone.
Right.
All the operating systems are dead. All the products are dead. All the languages are dead except for C.
And there's certain things that stay the same, like you say, DNS, but C is one that still, there's loads of it around. It's still powering a lot of critical systems, and it has a certain characteristic that, you can write mission critical systems with it. It's very difficult to manage, but it still has a role to play.
Right. So what should people learn? When I say the base of the pyramid, latency, CPU, memory,
right.
Systems architecture. Someone who was on my podcast recently, you should have on your show, named Keisha Rogers, said systems thinking is what we're not teaching kids. How do these things fit together? Everyone's focusing on the actual snapping of 2 Lego together and not the system in which the Legos live. And I think that's important.
We're big proponents on our show of systems thinking as well, extending out into the organization so that, the whole thing becomes one interconnected system.
That is really important because it's way squishier. Computing is way squishier because there's humans involved.
That's it.
Than we expected. So if you are a genius and you do all of the leet code and then you get to work and you don't understand why nobody likes you, because you're a jerk. And there's the squishy part of being a human that you have to think about. But then when you think about systems of people, I was talking to someone about they had a t-shirt business and they were explaining how simple it was. They order the t-shirts from somewhere unknown, the t-shirts arrive, and then they do their silk printing. But then I said, well, let's talk about the system. Where did they come from? Well, they just come on a ship. Well, what's fueling the ship? And how did the ship get here? And what country is it in? And what's the political situation in that country? And when it arrives, what are you paying? And they were like, wow, I never thought about like that piece of cotton. That came from
many tendrils.
The system is way larger than your little t-shirt business.
There's that good thing about in systems thinking generally where they describe it, you would think from a systems thinking thing, you would get to some sort of, well-organized flow chart or diagram, and they describe it as more like a jungle. Yep. Like the Amazon, like it's all overgrown and completely interconnected and interdependent.
Yep.
And there was
messy.
And
messy.
COVID tested those systems, and people found really weird consequences they had never thought about things.
And if we do a nice callback, because every good podcast has a great callback to the very beginning, the maintenance of the, in this case, middle-aged body is just holding this explosion as long as possible. For context, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I've been diabetic now on insulin for over 30 years. What's my goal? My goal is to die of old age.
Right.
So I'm basically outrunning, because diabetics die of diabetes, or old age gets them first.
Right.
So that's my goal.
That's your goal.
That's my goal, right? And in doing that, all of the things to maintain this system. Now, it's never going to be orderly. Where, like I said, meat bags under pressure. Just keep the meat bag running, keep the heart rate down, keep as chill as you can.
So, pivoting slightly into Ignite.
Oh, that was subtle.
Yeah.
No one's going to feel
Did anybody see that bridge
at all. That was beautiful.
So, very briefly then, what have you been up to this week? And from your space in Microsoft, what have you brought to the show?
So, I was on a call with a marketing person, and they were telling me the messages we need to push and the things we need to sell and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not really, interested in any of that. So they were kind of talking me, like helping me emotionally deal with the fact that, like, I'm here to sell something, right? Or I'm here to be a marketing person. Before I was really into software, I was a professor at a state university and also a community college, which is like an industry 2-year degree school. And I realized that if you're excited about a product and you do what the MBAs call product-led growth, which means the product is awesome. Actually, it's so awesome, it's delightful, and you'll talk about it with your friends. Then all my job is to teach people and empower them to go and build stuff.
Right.
So I have been doing talks, doing sessions. I just got off the stage, like I mentioned, doing one on GitHub Copilot, reintroducing it for people who may have looked at it a year ago. And I genuinely excited about that product and what it does for me. So if that translates to them on stage, then they'll try it or they won't try it. The marketing person is happy about it. But I don't talk about stuff that I'm not amped about.
Gotcha.
So sometimes it's 3D printing, sometimes it's Copilot. But my team is enabled to talk about the things that they're excited about. So I have people that are jazzed about Python, and I have people that are jazzed about .NET. And they're out kind of like running around going, have you heard the news?
Right.
Have you heard the news about thing 1 or thing 2?
Very cool.
Yeah.
And when you look forward, maybe over the next, pick your own time horizon, 12, 18, 24 months.
I thought you were going to say years there.
Yeah.
I mean,
he wants me to die of old age, is what I mean.
I thought that was where he was going.
That was lovely.
Okay, Dave.
That was almost as good as the segue to Ignite.
I'm building towards it. Everyone hold your horses.
A consummate professional.
Yeah. I'm getting there. Yeah, so what, in your space, when you think about the next couple of years, what's coming along that's really exciting to you?
I think that the atoms, the atomic tasks that we do as developers, as we alt-tab over to this app or switch into this tool to run Postman or do whatever, will be less atomic, and we'll start seeing kind of molecules where those molecules will be a higher level task.
Right.
And there'll be a beginning and an end. Like in Copilot, you'll start a chat. You're not just talking to the thing, but you're saying, all right, time to do that bug. Time to do that PR. And from the moment you pick up the issue to the moment that you commit the pull request, that task has a length and a duration. It might be days, it might be hours. I think we'll start to see the rise of task-based developer workflows.
Right.
Right now, it's very kind of like, Wild West. I'd like to see tools enable us to kind of not be on rails, but at least on the Primrose path towards success. So success-based, task-based tools, I think we're going to start seeing.
There's a lot in there around the you're able to context switch, come back, and it sustains the where you got to. It can update you. It can almost push to remind you, don't forget you've got this to deal with, but it's becoming an assistant, but in a way that's understanding you and the world you're in.
Wouldn't you love a Netflix recap? When last we left our heroes, they were debugging a Python application. You'll recall that they were having trouble with the call stack.
We've all been in that place where you wrote code 2 days ago and you come back and you go, I don't understand my own code. I've forgotten about it, because you get in the moment, you get in the flow, and then you look at it and you go, what was I thinking?
Okay, so you just said something that's a keyword for me, in the flow. Yeah. So in my estimation, there's 2 things as a developer, that you're either in the toil or you're in the flow.
Yeah.
So we want to make it so people are doing less toil and more flow work. Yeah. How do you stay in that flow work? So things like, I proposed many, many years ago on social media that we should have developer mode. Like there's
switch it on.
Just switch on developer mode. Like, turn off antivirus, turn off all the notifications. Like, do not bother me. Like, back in the day when we used to work in cubicles and stuff, like before we all went remote, I used to put up like police tape around my, like do not talk to this developer. He's in the flow. And I think it's hard to get in the flow.
Yeah. Interruptions everywhere, and people just expect you to be on demand all the time with modern communication. And I think I always remember back to the you get in that zone, you can spend hours at it, and then you suddenly stand back and you it's evening.
Yeah.
And you go,
That hasn't happened in a while. And I want to be able to have that lost time.
Yeah.
Because it's enjoyable. And I also want to remind folks that are struggling with that level of productivity that airplane mode works on the ground.
Yes.
And do you think what is driving the focal length here? So do you think it is the fact that new generations coming through have grown up with social media, they've grown up with kind of, things that are lasting 30 seconds rather than even 30 minutes or an hour, and therefore the concentration times are shorter? Or is it the invasion of notifications in the workplace that is getting in the way?
I'm preparing for an epic callback, so I want you to just buckle up.
I'm holding my breath.
Would you like a countdown, drum roll?
No. We are neglecting our core work. And you noticed that it was time to start thinking about your core. My now 17-year-old, it was his birthday yesterday, started telling me that social media was making his head ache, and he felt like maybe he couldn't read anymore. And what do you mean you can't read? You read well. And he's like, no, I don't think I could sit down and read a 300-page book anymore. Like I could when I read, Harry Potter, but now here I am 2 years later and I'm rotting. That's the word that kids use.
Right.
I'm rotting, or with another generation might call it doom scrolling, where you blink and you lose an hour.
Yeah.
The trick is though, you notice that your core wasn't there and you're building your core up again. We are the customer. They are taking our time away from us. They are now making not us the customer, but the product.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're taking our attention, and they're selling us a bunch of crap on Temu. And we need to put that into airplane mode, and we need to do some push-ups.
Yeah.
And those push-ups are deep work, great book, reading books like Deep Work, trying to code in airplane mode, seeing if you can still do it.
Yes, if you can stand it.
Yeah.
Like how long can you stand being away from the device?
Because I get that ADHD is a thing. It's a valid thing. There are people who have a genuine, differently wired, neuro-spicy brain. But you may not have ADHD.
Yeah.
You may just be getting ruined by an algorithm that is designed to make you feel bad about yourself.
There was an interesting point about when they did the study about what people click on and view in social media, and it always tends towards the bad side rather than the good side. People spend more time dwelling on the bad than the good, and therefore the algorithm then serves that up because they think that's more popular. And you go, it's just a terrible cycle.
If I could just get physical credit for all of the kettlebell workouts that I've bookmarked on Instagram that I'm not actually doing, you know what I'm saying? But that takes a lot of willpower, right? So we need to build up that muscle, that deep work muscle, and I think that is going to be a skill that I hope my children will have, and I want to encourage others to have, because we're losing time.
Well, we had a guy on the show called Dave Snowden, and he developed a thing called the Cynefin framework, which is about sort of complexity and complicated working and things like that. But one of the observations that he made on the show was that he goes around and talks to universities and schools, and he was referring to some of the top schools in the US. They're taking computers out of the classroom because to exactly this point, they're developing concentration span and critical thinking as being differentiated human traits for the sort of world that they're all going to go into.
Yeah, my son's AP advanced placement English class is now doing long form writing, and their tests and their books and things that they're writing, their short stories are all written on yellow steno pads.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely critical, isn't it? Absolutely critical.
And I've talked to him about whether or not to use OpenAI or AI. And what is the relationship with the homework that is perceived as busy work, and with him, and he's like, I'm using it to brainstorm, but I don't trust it because it just generates nonsense.
Garbage. Funnily enough, I called my son up at lunchtime today just to say goodnight and things like that, and he was overjoyed with something that happened at school with one of his friends today who'd stood up in class and read out an answer and got totally busted for reading out a Gen AI generated answer. And I'm like, and obviously he found it absolutely hilarious, but they put it through like one of those like testing tools to find out how much was like generated. And it was like 78% generated by Gen AI.
Yeah, you can't really trust those tools, but it's true that you really can't trust anything right now. So the idea is, what should your relationship be with an AI? And I think the one that I've been saying is trust but verify. And for young people, and how old is your son?
He's 15.
Okay. So there's a really great book by a gentleman named John Warner, who's a famous English teacher and a professor here, that's called Why They Can't Write. And it talks about the death of the 5-paragraph essay,
right,
and how the 5-paragraph essay, intro, 3 supporting paragraphs, and a conclusion, is now so much as part of the corpus of text that the AI is generated on, that it'll generate a perfectly fine B- essay.
Yeah.
So it is promoting a kind of mediocrity. So then we have to ask ourselves, what is the AI for? Here at Ignite, callback, what is a Copilot for? It's got to be for toil. Creative writing is not toil. Toil is, hey, Copilot, can you prepare me for the Capgemini podcast? Tell me about these gentlemen. Look up their LinkedIns. What do we have in common?
You still came on the podcast after you asked it to research us.
You can't trust anything you get back.
And when it failed to give me a satisfactory answer, I came on the podcast anyway.
But I wanted to go... we're close to running out of time, and there's a couple of things I wanted to pick up with you before we run out of time. The first one is a callback to Ballmer's developers, which was how long ago now? Probably a couple of decades ago.
It's been 20 years plus, yeah.
And obviously at the time, his point was it's all going to be about development. It's all going to be about code. And he was making an extremely valid point. I wonder, 20 years later, how well, and going into a generation of AI, how well that's holding up for you.
Say what you will about Ballmer, but he was right.
Yeah. And
here's the thing. How many developers are there? Maybe 50 million, maybe 30 million. Depends on what you call a developer, right? What the slider bar of developer is. Let's say 30 million. Well, there's 8,000 million people on the planet and only 50 million developers. So who has the power in that context?
The point, I hadn't thought about it like that, but software literally controls the world now, whatever it is.
Yeah. So one of the things I've been testing my sons on is to push their empathy to the limits. We talk about systems thinking.
Right.
Next time you look at your thermostat, there was a team that had a meeting about that thermostat.
You wouldn't think so, given the UI on mine.
Yeah. But is it going to be round? Is it going to be square? Right. Who designed the LCD? Where did that LCD come from? Like, do the experiment to write out the bill of lading and think about the team. Who ran that team? Those are real people. We could find them. We could go on LinkedIn. We're so connected now. It would not be hard to find the person that worked on that thermostat.
Right.
Someone wrote that code, probably in C. But then it's talking to some back end that's running on Azure, that's running an Azure pub sub, just so you could turn your heat up. And then you want to ask yourself, do I need a cloud-connected thermostat at all?
Well, so a bimetallic strip used to work quite well.
Or do I go and use Home Assistant and run the whole thing internal?
Rob is passionate about the internet-connected toaster.
Why do we have an
serious?
internet? No. I'm like, why did you internet connect the toaster? Because you have to be at the toaster to use it. Why do I need to control it from my phone? And my view is somebody walked into a room somewhere and just told the engineers to internet connect everything. Because that's the future. And you're like, should we really? Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
And putting a big giant Android tablet on the front of your fridge does not make it a smart fridge.
It does not make it
I would like a dumb TV with a one HDMI cable, and it just does nothing.
Yeah, so right.
I actually have a thing called a Pi hole, a Raspberry Pi DNS hole.
Right.
Are you familiar with this? PI hole, HOLE. Yeah. It's a Raspberry Pi that runs a local DNS server, and then you put in block lists, and it blocks anything that you want. So it turns on basically ad blocking for your entire house. But I also shut off my Samsung TV or my whatever fridge to keep them from phoning home to get whatever nonsense that they want to do to push that nonsense to me.
Yeah. Well, look, Scott, on that note, thank you so much for taking some time out this week in a very busy schedule to come and talk to us in a fantastic, wide-ranging conversation. You can tell you've done pods before.
Yeah, I have done a few, and I would encourage folks to listen to them if they tolerated this. If you made it this far, go and take a look at hanselman.com/podcasts and check those out. And I'll be sure to check out Cloud Realities.
Please do. Now, look, we've been asking our guests at the end of each of these shows this week about one of the big questions in Chicagoland, which is, where do you stand on the deep pan pizza? Now, I understand for medical reasons you don't stand on them at all.
Yes.
So, but I wonder if you have a view.
I would have to say I am non-denominational.
Yeah.
I support everyone's religion. I realize that thin pizza and deep dish it's a whole thing, and I don't want to get into a religious argument because I will lose. But I'll leave you with this controversy though. Pineapple belongs on pizza.
Oh no!
Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, an amazing lineup today. A tremendous insight, I think, into like how Microsoft is thinking about this stuff.
Yeah. So that whole balance of baking security in, unifying its viewpoint on it, making sure the responsibilities there in doing it right. There's clearly an ethos which is important, and of course that should be baked into all corporate approaches to AI, and in fact personal as well. It's just that understanding of what's important, get it right first time, because we discussed you break the trust. Yeah. You've got a massive uphill battle to counter it, which I quite like that sort of viewpoint. It's a compelling one to embrace.
I thought that two major things stood out to me. Sarah Bird's view on where Microsoft should be in the regulation race, which is out front leading it from a responsible perspective. I think that's a very honourable and the right thing to do, given what could happen if it went wrong. But also a pretty thrilling set of views on pizzas, I think. But I'm not feeling a lot of love for the deep pan.
No, thrilling / controversial at times.
Controversial at times, for sure.
Yeah. The whole pizza. And of course, we'll have to come up with the answer to your dilemma at the end of tomorrow.
That's right. We will make a final judgment on Giordano's versus Lou Multan. What was his name again? Lou Multan. What was his name?
He's saying it over there.
Multano. Okay, there
come to the microphone and say the right pizza name.
We luckily we have an aficionado and Chicagoan local.
Yes, Ralph Rivas here.
Hey, Ralph.
Chicago's my hometown. Welcome to it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So as we say here in Chicago, it's Lo Malnati's, and
that's the way to pronounce
that way
it.
too. But basically, the pizza. All right. I'm not going to say anything about the Giordano's. You will be the guide and the judge.
We will revert in tomorrow's episode with that big judgment. It's exciting stuff, isn't it?
In inverted commas, yes, Dave.
Yeah.
Not even inverted commas.
Just exciting.
This is genuinely exciting.
What I love about you, Dave, is you attach yourself to these things and you totally invest yourself in them.
Correct.
And it's wondrous to observe.
Living life,
the way of the world.
Exactly, Ralph. Thank you very much for that correction. Appreciate that. All right, and tomorrow, another big run through of guests. So we're going to talk again about security. We're going to talk about the Azure platform and as it relates to AI. And we're also going to talk about specific industry sectors. And tomorrow is basically going to be focused on some financial services from an industry point of view. So a lot more views coming in tomorrow's show. And we'll do a bit of a roundup in general of what we thought the overall show looked like, as well as the big pizza result.
Indeed, the grand reveal. So if you would like to discuss any of the topics on this show and how they might impact you in your business, please get in touch, cloudrealities@capgemini.com. We're all on X and LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to connect and DM if you have any questions you want us to tackle. And of course, please rate and subscribe to our podcast. It really helps us improve the show. I'd like to say a huge thanks to Rudra, Sarah, Yina and Scott, our sound and editing wizard Ben and Louis, our ever-loving producer Marcel, and of course to all our listeners.
And to Ralph.
For the correction on the pizza. Thank you, Ralph. See you back in Microsoft's reality soon.